and welcome to Keep Calm and Money On, your personal financial coaching channel, where our goal is to give you peace of mind and security when it comes to your finances. Today's show is going to focus on the topic of emergency funds, what they are, what they're not, how much money you should keep in there, and where the money should be kept. But before we go any further, make sure to click the subscribe button below the video and ring that little bell to let YouTube know that you don't want to miss any new episodes. New episodes will be published every Monday. Okay, first on the list of what to cover, what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is just money that's been set aside in case an unexpected event occurs that requires you to pay out a sum of money. Some examples are losing your job, a medical emergency, home repairs, car repairs, and other such situations that you cannot foresee or plan for. Emergency funds help keep the stress levels down when an emergency occurs because it allows you to deal with the emergency rationally and with little anxiety because you know you have the money already set aside to deal with this exact situation. Not having the money to cover an emergency situation only exacerbates the situation and makes it more difficult to deal with. Because of the nature of an emergency and how it usually requires you to pay money out pretty quickly, the account holding the funds must be easily accessible and the funds must be liquid at all times so that you can access the money anytime as quickly as possible. An emergency fund is not I really want to buy this new car, so I'm just going to use my emergency fund for it. It's not I want to go out with my friends for dinner and drinks, but I don't have any more money left in my paycheck, so I'll just use my emergency fund and then I'll replenish it later. It's not oh my God, it's Christmas and I need to get gifts for my whole family, so I'll just dip into my emergency fund and then figure out how to pay it back later. The point is, an emergency fund is only for emergencies. That is, things you did not see coming, could not have anticipated happening, and could not have planned for. Be aware of the life expectancy of your more expensive items. If your car has over 180,000 miles on it, it's probably safe to say that you should start setting aside some money for a new car so that when your current car inevitably dies, you're not pigeonholed into jumping right into buying an expensive car or taking out a lease because you don't have time to shop around and you need a car to get to work. I love when Dave Ramsey rants about this because it's so true. Christmas comes at the same time every year. Plan for it. Christmas is not an emergency. Start putting away a little bit of money every month, starting in June or May or whenever. And once December rolls around, you have a hefty stash for Christmas gifts, so you don't have to go into debt or touch your emergency fund. The same goes for your boiler, your HVAC system in your home, or your roof. Do some research, figure out how long these things normally last before they die, and set aside money so that way when they inevitably do die, you won't be blindsided with thousands of dollars in repairs or replacement costs. Okay, now that we know what an emergency fund is and what it is not, how much money should be in there? The rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. What do I mean by essential? If you were to lose your job, for example, you would likely buckle down and only buy and pay for necessities, right? Which would be your rent, mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, credit card debt, student loan debt, car payments. You get the point. You're not going to be going out to eat every night. You're not going to be going out on the weekends buying new clothes. So to figure out what 3 to 6 months of essential expenses looks like for you, go back to your monthly budget and look to see what your expenses are. Don't take into consideration anything that isn't an absolute necessity. And from there, you can figure out how much you would spend per month in an emergency scenario. So now to figure out how many months of expenses you would want to cover, consider, among other things, whether you have 1 or 2 incomes in your household, how stable your job is, and how quickly you would be able to find a new job in your field. If you were a 2-income household, you'd probably be okay saving closer to 3 months of essential expenses rather than 6. However, just because you're a 1-income household doesn't mean you need 6 months of expenses either, as you might have a stable job where there is a low likelihood that you will be fired or laid off. This really comes down to personal preference and what would help you sleep at night. But keep in mind that overpacking your emergency fund may mean tying up more money than is necessary. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of your money, and whatever measly return you get in your savings or checking account will not be enough to counteract inflation. So you want to keep just enough in the bank to cover your emergencies without having so much that your dollars are losing their value because they're just sitting there. And that brings us to where emergency funds should be kept. There are a number of different options out there. I know I said earlier that keeping funds in a savings or checking account makes them susceptible to value erosion due to inflation. And with that being said, you might think, okay, well, let's optimize the emergency fund then to make sure I'm capitalizing on its value. But don't worry about optimizing your emergency fund for good returns. That money is not for investment purposes. You're not seeking return on it. Its only purpose is to give you peace of mind and the ability to sleep soundly at night, knowing that if an unexpected event were to occur, you have the money to pay for it without derailing your financial goals or putting you into debt. I only want you to keep the purchasing value of your dollars in mind when you decide how much to put into your emergency fund. But once you've done that, a high interest online savings account, a checking account, a savings account at a credit union are all really great options. Just please make sure your emergency fund is in an account specifically open for it. Do not commingle your funds. Don't just say to yourself, that $10,000 in my checking account is earmarked for emergencies, because you might accidentally spend it. Instead, take the extra 20 minutes and open up a new bank account. Put the money in there and let it sit there in case of a rainy day. There's also the option of doing what's called a CD ladder, where you put money in multiple CDs at once with different maturity dates. For example, let's say you have $5,000 that you set aside for emergencies. You could put $1,000 into a 3-month CD, $1,000 into a 6-month CD, and the remaining $3,000 into a 12-month CD. You can customize your CD ladder based on how long you feel comfortable leaving your savings locked up in CDs. So each time a CD matures, you put the money into a new CD and so on. This is not ideal because you're making your money less accessible and easily attainable. If you need the money, but you still have, let's say, 1 month left before your CD matures, you might have to pay penalties to take the money out early, such as foregoing the interest payments, which is why you put the money in the CD to begin with. While a CD just barely keeps up with inflation, the rigid nature of having to keep the money in there for a specific amount of time or suffer penalties makes this option not really any more attractive than a regular high-interest online savings account. So those are the important points I wanted to cover on emergency funds. I have 2 more bonus alternatives to bank accounts, but I have to give you a huge disclaimer here. You can only consider these 2 alternatives if you are organized with your finances and will pay off the balance as quickly as possible, incurring little to no interest payments along the way. The first alternative is credit card float. So if you're faced with an emergency and you don't have the cash on hand to cover it, you put it on a credit card, which buys you some time to come up with the cash. Only do this if you will pay off the full balance at the end of the month or the statement cycle. You do not want to pay interest on this debt. It will only cause you to go even further into debt. The second alternative is to take a home equity line of credit out on your house. It would function the same as a credit card in that it would buy you a little bit of time to come up with the money. A HELOC is basically like a second mortgage. And the idea of having 2 mortgages out on your house, honestly, it causes me anxiety. I really would not recommend this option and could see someone using this really as a last resort only if they have a set plan for how they will pay the money back in a reasonable amount of time. That's it for today. So give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down to let me know what you think about the content. And if you found this episode useful, share it with someone who might find it helpful as well. The more you know, the more options you have. Next week, we're going to talk about retirement accounts, the difference between them, how much you can contribute, and all sorts of other really fun stuff. So make sure you click the subscribe button below and ring the little bell so you're notified as soon as the episode is posted. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, keep calm and money on.